Welcome to SST8's series on evidence-based instructional strategies. This webinar is one in our series of webinars aimed at improving student performance. The intent of these webinars is for teacher-based teams, individual teachers, or building-level teams to view and discuss the content and to provide flexibility in meeting your professional development needs. For example, you may choose to chunk the content and break it up over multiple days, or you may wish to use it as part of a professional development day. This session is focused on reciprocal teaching. Reciprocal teaching is a scaffolded or supported discussion technique that incorporates 4 main strategies: predicting, questioning, clarifying, and summarizing, all things that good readers use together to comprehend text. For this session, you will want to access our Evidence-Based Strategies Reciprocal Teaching resource document to follow along throughout the training. For today's webinar, we have 3 learning intentions. Our content learning intention is that you will be able to learn about the 4 comprehension strategies that comprise reciprocal teaching and how reciprocal teaching can be used to increase comprehension. The language learning intention is that you will reflect on, discuss, and share new thinking around the process of reciprocal teaching. And for our social learning intention, you will participate in conversations and collaborate with team members to increase your impact on student learning using reciprocal teaching. Much of the information shared in this session comes from the visible learning research from John Hattie. Also, a big thank you to Missouri Educational Systems and Instruction for Learning for their in-depth research and information around this topic. When we discuss John Hattie's work, we talk specifically about effect sizes. In his research, John has found that the average effect size over all effects that he has studied is 0.4. Hattie considers the 0.4 effect size to be a marker that represented a year's growth per year of schooling for a student. Anything above 0.4 would have a greater positive effect on student learning. When we talk about learning, there are 3 types of learning: surface, deep, and transfer. According to Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry, surface learning refers to building foundational knowledge, such as concepts, skills, and strategies. Deep learning is consolidating foundational knowledge to be able to apply and extend learning to develop a deeper understanding. And transfer learning is the point where students take all of their knowledge and understanding and apply it in new and different contexts. Fisher, Fry, and Hattie have characterized numerous evidence-based strategies, and you can see where the strategies fall in regard to surface, deep, and transfer learning. As you can see from this chart, reciprocal teaching is a deep learning strategy and has an effect size of 0.74. Let's start with identifying what is reciprocal teaching. Reciprocal teaching is an effective teaching or learning practice and is defined as students summarizing, questioning, clarifying, and predicting. They take turns being the teacher. So let's do a quick reflection. Consider the following question: how am I currently teaching my students to predict, learn new words, question, and summarize to become independent thinkers and readers? At this time, pause the webinar and discuss with your team members. So you may be wondering, when should reciprocal teaching be implemented? Reciprocal teaching is an effective strategy to utilize when students are having difficulty with making meaning and comprehension. The research found reciprocal teaching to be effective with all students, but specifically students with disabilities, English learners, and bilingual students. This deep learning strategy with an effect size of 0.74 is a structured reading routine where each participant has a specific task: summarizing, questioning, clarifying, or predicting. So let's start with this essential question. How does reciprocal teaching improve students' comprehension? Reciprocal teaching is a scaffolded or supported discussion technique that incorporates four main strategies: predicting, questioning, clarifying, and summarizing, that good readers use together to comprehend text. Think about how you use these strategies in your own reading as an adult. For example, when you read an article in a newspaper, in a magazine, or on the internet, you probably first look at the visuals and skim as you predict what the piece is about. Then, as you read, you alternate between clarifying ideas and words by rereading and using other strategies, such as asking questions or wondering about something you don't understand. You summarize throughout your reading and predict what will come next along the way. Good readers do all of this naturally every time they read. What are the benefits of reciprocal teaching? Reciprocal teaching is an instructional procedure developed to improve students' text comprehension skills through scaffolded instruction of four comprehension monitoring strategies. That is, generating one's own questions, summarizing parts of the text, clarifying word meanings and confusing text passages, and predicting what might come next in the text. These four strategies are involved in reciprocal teaching in ongoing dialogues with a dialogue leader and the remaining students of the learning group. What is the role of the teacher in reciprocal teaching? The teacher's job in reciprocal teaching is to introduce the different strategies and practice the strategies: predicting, questioning, clarifying, and summarizing with the students. The teacher practices these strategies by using think-alouds, scaffolding, and modeling. Modeling these strategies can easily happen in a virtual learning environment. As students become more aware and efficient using the strategies, the teacher then begins to hand over the direction and implementation to the students, who will then guide and direct the discussion of the group. So what is the role of the student? The student's job is to observe the teacher introducing and implementing the different strategies. Students then take an active role in practicing and learning how to use the strategies of predicting, questioning, clarifying, and summarizing through small group practice. This opportunity for practice could happen in a virtual learning environment via Google Meet or in breakout rooms. For example, the teacher may use a jigsaw method for each of the strategies, meaning that all of the summarizers meet together to practice summarizing in a breakout room prior to them going back to work with their home group. As students become capable of successfully using the strategies, they take roles in the discussion to reinforce their learning, direct their learning, and reflect on their learning. Here's a great quotation from John Hattie. "The biggest effects on student learning occur when the teachers become learners of their own teaching and when students become their own teachers. And reciprocal teaching provides the opportunity for that to happen." When we think about helping to improve students' comprehension, one easy way to do so is to help set the purpose for reading. How many times can you think about something that you've read that you didn't really retain? Setting the purpose can help students understand and determine what is important in text, determine what is remembered, determine what comprehension strategy might be a good fit, and increase the likelihood that information will be held in long-term memory. Have you ever heard a student say, "I read it, but I don't get it"? Of course you have. Purpose is everything. But how often when we assign reading to students, do we help them to understand the reader's purpose? A reader's purpose affects everything about reading. It determines what's important in the text, what is remembered, and what comprehension strategy a reader uses to enhance meaning. Let's try a quick activity. On your evidence-based strategies reciprocal teaching resource document, you'll find the link for the excerpt that we'll be using during this reader's purpose activity. The passage that we'll be using is called The House. And as you'll notice, you need a pen or pencil, a pink highlighter, and a yellow highlighter. Please read through the text in circle using a pen or pencil, whatever you think is most important in the text. Pause the webinar and resume when all members of the team are ready to move on. Okay, now read through the passage again, and with your pink highlighter, mark the places in text about information that a robber would find important. Pause and resume the webinar when your team is ready. Read the selection a third time, and this time with a yellow highlighter, mark any places in the passage a prospective homebuyer might find important. Pause the webinar and pick back up when you are ready. What did you notice as you went through this activity? How important is it to set the purpose for reading? As a result of this activity, how might you apply this practice with your students? At this time, pause the webinar and respond to one or both of the questions on the slide with your teammates. You might be wondering, how do I teach the process of reciprocal teaching? Well, here's how you can do it. Step 1, scaffold student learning by modeling, guiding, and applying the strategies while reading. Read a section of the text aloud and model the 4 steps: summarizing, clarifying, questioning, and predicting. Step 2, in groups of 4, allocate a role to each student. One student will serve as the summarizer, one is the questioner, one will be the clarifier, and finally one student will be the predictor. Step 3, have students read a few paragraphs of a text selection. Suggest to students that they use note-taking strategies such as underlining, coding, etc. Step 4, let's talk about each of the roles in reciprocal teaching. The predictor will help the group connect sections of the text by reviewing predictions from the previous section and help the group predict what they will read about next by using clues and inferences in the text. The questioner will help the group to ask and answer questions about the text and remind the group to use all types of questions, including higher level questions. The summarizer will restate the main ideas in the text and help the group state the main idea or ideas in their own words. The clarifier will help the group find parts of the text that are not clear and find ways to help clear up those difficulties. Step 5, when your students are ready, the roles in the group switch and the next selection of text is read. Students repeat the process in their new role. Repeat this process until the text and the topic selection is finished. Continue to guide the students in the use of the 4 strategies until they can use the one strategy that they started with independently. As you are now aware, understanding the purpose for reading is imperative, and understanding each student's specific role as they participate in reciprocal teaching is critical. As mentioned previously, there are 4 roles in reciprocal teaching. They are predictor, clarifier, questioner, and summarizer. So let's dive into each of these steps to find out more about reciprocal teaching. What does the predictor do? To make predictions, readers use information in a text to anticipate about what they are ready to read. This happens throughout multiple times in the reading process. For example, when pre-reading, which is based upon a review of text features like titles, headings, pictures, and captions, students will make predictions about the content of the passage. During reading, readers cue in to the use of questions used by the author within a text, or when a character is about to do something. And finally, during post-reading, readers check their predictions. When we think about predicting, students will use evidence from the text to help form predictions about the text, and will use evidence from the text and/or illustrations to support their predictions. Students will use the language of prediction, like I think, I predict, I'll bet. They'll also make predictions using phrases such as based on evidence in the text on page, I thought that the chapter could be about blank because. If you or your team members are interested in seeing an example of a teacher modeling how to make a prediction with her students, check out the video link on the evidence-based reciprocal teaching resource document. Here's an activity focused on prediction that you may want to try out with your students. You may notice on some of the slides, you'll see the phrase, give it a go. In Australia, they use the phrase, give it a go, when they're talking about trying something out for the first time. So here's an activity to practice making predictions. You may want to give it a go. It's called Partner Stroll. Choose a text for your students to preview. Assign participants to preview a selected text. They will write down 3 to 4 predictions with supporting clues from the text. Then assign each student a partner. Partners should share their predictions and clues with each other. Signal partners to find a new partner. They will complete this process with 3 to 4 partners. New partners will share their prediction and clues with each other. Complete the partner switch as needed. Now, this could be done virtually by assigning students partners, and they can share a Google Doc to collaborate. This could also be done in a Google Meet session, or perhaps recording their predictions in Flipgrid. I'm confident that you will think of many more ideas to integrate this predictor activity in a virtual environment. Here's another predictor activity for you to give it a go. It's called Story Impressions. First, select a short narrative text for this activity. From a selected narrative text, choose 7 to 10 words that relate to the characters, setting, problem, events, and solution of the story. Post the words in a column in the order that they appear in the story. Next, assign participants to work in small groups to construct a story using all of the words in the order that they were listed. Then, have each group share their story with the whole group. Finally, have the students read the original story and then compare and contrast their stories with the original story. This could easily be adapted in a virtual environment as well. Let's pause and reflect. At this time, pause the webinar and read the 2 questions on the slide. Share your thoughts with your teammates. Okay, let's take a look at the second role in the group, the role of the clarifier. When students clarify, they apply grade level phonics and word analysis skills to decode new and unfamiliar words. They rely on context to confirm, self-correct, and reread when necessary. They also analyze how parts of the text fit together and clarify by rereading and reading on to figure out confusing points, words, or phrases. As we think about reciprocal teaching and the specifics of the role of the clarifier's role is to ask if anyone got stuck on a word or an idea, to help their teammates by using resources. They can remind their students to try rereading first. If a teammate is stuck on a word, they should try using a resource, even a glossary or dictionary. If these methods don't work, ask for help from the teacher. Also, role prompts could benefit the clarifier by using language such as, can someone help me understand? What do you think the author meant by? Teachers should note that if students are having difficulty, you can try these tips. Look for little words inside the big words. Look for word parts. Pause and then read on. The remainder of the paragraph may help the reader get an understanding of the unknown word. Here are some additional tips for helping students with the idea of clarifying. Identify words that are difficult to pronounce or understand. Use a variety of strategies to understand the words, including finding chunks they know, sounding out the words, using syllables, and rereading. Have students tell how they clarified a different word. Identify sentences, pages, or ideas that need clarifying. Use a variety of strategies to understand the parts, such as rereading or reading on. Talk to someone to figure out the parts of the text that confuse them. One sentence frame that might be helpful would be, I didn't get blank, so I used blank, which would be the strategy they used to help repair the comprehension. For teaching clarifying, let's give it a go with read, cover, remember, and retell to help students understand a text even when they don't understand what they are reading. You will teach the students to read only as much as their hand can cover. Cover up the part of the story they just read. Remember to think about what they just read, and then retell what they just read to a partner. For this pause and reflect opportunity, choose one of the 3 questions listed that you and your team want to discuss. What do you do when struggling readers continue to plow through a text even when they don't understand what they are reading? How can you help students to slow down their reading process and focus on the meaning of the text? Or what do you want to remember about clarifying that you want to try with your students? At this time, pause the webinar to discuss the question that you've selected with your colleagues. Okay, let's move on to the role of the questioner. Here's something to remember. Students cite textual evidence and draw on multiple sources to ask and answer questions in order to understand the text better. Readers who ask questions during reading are actively engaged and monitor their comprehension. Questions should focus on the information in the text. They should test their predictions and clarification of unknown words. Questions should identify what is important to remember about the text. They should ask who, what, when, where, why, and how, and ask you to compare. While struggling readers find processing and synthesizing difficult, spending time explicitly teaching it can greatly increase reading comprehension. The best way to teach students to generate main idea questions is through guided lessons. Students who have the role of the questioner will ask a question that could be answered in the text. Might be a right there or think and search question. They may ask an opinion question. Do you agree with? What do you think about? Or they might show their teammates where they found their answers. When we think about questioning, let's take a look at some of the question starters. Most students are familiar with the questions who, what, when, where, why, and how. Once these are formulated, try extending them to question phrases to help students begin to formulate higher level questions. Some examples might include, I wonder, what caused, what are the characteristics of, what if, what does this remind you of? What is the most important thing to remember? What does the author mean when, would you agree that, or would it be better if? Here is a questioning activity called I Wonder that works well with nonfiction text. Let's give it a go. First, have students skim through an excerpt of text, picture book, textbook, or an article. Assign them to write an I wonder question for each page of a picture book or each section of a textbook or article. After writing the I wonder questions, students go back and read the text to find answers. At this time, let's pause and reflect. Choose one of the questions on this slide to discuss with your team. Pause the webinar, and when you're finished discussing the question, feel free to start the webinar. Now, let's take a look at the role of the summarizer. In summarizing, students identify main ideas and details and compare and contrast the structure of a text to determine themes and to summarize narrative text. They also integrate and evaluate information from the text and support their claims with text evidence. Let's think through why a summary is constructed. A summary is constructed for yourself, largely for the purpose of remembering what you've read or heard. Possibly for an audience where you may need to explain the background information within the discipline that you're writing, or is a learned process of deleting, substituting, and keeping information. What do we need to teach our students to do? We must teach our students how to identify important information, no matter the content or how it is presented, to dig for main ideas and supporting details, principal claims and evidence, and to structure the information for meaning and successful application. Here are some basic prompts to help the summarizer in the group to get started. The summarizer might say, here are some of the prompts for fiction text. The story takes place. The main characters are. A problem occurs when. And here are some nonfiction prompts. I learned that the most important ideas in this text are. This part was about. As a summarizer, the student will tell their teammates the main idea of the passage and the important supporting details, and make sure that the summary isn't longer than the reading. A key difference between summarizing a narrative versus an expository text is, when summarizing narrative text, students should use story structure, characters, setting, problem, events, resolution to help recount the story in order. When summarizing the expository text, students need to determine the most important ideas and arrange them in a logical order. If you are interested in exploring a video with a teacher modeling how to engage students in reflection using summarizing, you may wish to check out the video link on the Evidence-Based Strategies Reciprocal Teaching resource document. With your teammates, choose one of the questions on this slide to discuss. At this time, pause the webinar and have a conversation with your colleagues. If you're interested in seeing reciprocal teaching in action, check out the video links on your Evidence-Based Strategies Reciprocal Teaching resource document. We've included an elementary and secondary example. Select the video that best meets your needs. Before you begin viewing, you may wish to consider these questions and jot down some notes. What did you notice? What do you want to remember? How could you replicate and implement this process in a virtual learning environment if needed? Now that we've talked about the components of reciprocal teaching and you've had an opportunity to practice it, let's take it to the next level and examine how a TBT or PLC could monitor the strategy and check on the impact of the strategy implementation. Monitoring the adult actions and the impact on student performance will help the TBT or PLC see the impact of the strategy using an action research approach. The TBT or PLC should determine and examine how the team will effectively implement the strategy so that everyone on the team is on the same page prior to implementation. Teams will need to determine how often they will check in. For example, this team decided to check in once a week for the month of September. Here's an example. This team selected the following dates: September 1st, September 8th, September 15th, September 22nd. What evidence of adult actions will the team collect to measure the impact of the strategy? The team decided that they will create a checklist for the steps in the strategy to ensure fidelity, that they will use formative assessment data and look specifically at comprehension. They also decided that they would use peer observation, and that might occur virtually or in the classroom. What student data will the team gather? They decided to gather informal observation checklist data and formative assessment data. How will the team determine if the strategy is working? This needs to be decided by the team ahead of time. Teams could ask the following questions throughout the process. What is going well, and how do we know? For this example, the team started with identifying a goal. At least 80% of students will perform the assigned roles: summarizing, predicting, clarifying, and questioning using an informal observation checklist. After gathering their data, here's what they found. When the team looked at their formative assessment scores and comprehension, they noticed that student performance had increased from 20% to 65%, and this was at the mid-check-in point. They also noted that 60% of their African American subgroup is at or close to mastery or above. This was during week 1 when the team observation checklist was utilized. What is not going well? How do we know? And what are some possible solutions? The team found that data from the informal observation checklist would suggest that the students with disabilities would need more support on summarizing. They found that the students with disabilities might benefit from the use of a template to provide additional support. Another discussion question that the team reviewed was, What, if any, difficulties have we encountered since our last meeting? What are the solutions? The team determined that some students may need clarification of student roles in reciprocal teaching. The solution determined was to create table tents with the role and a reminder of the role. Don't forget, monitoring the adult actions and the impact on student performance will help the TBT and PLC see the impact of the strategy in real time by using action research approaches. Reflection is key as you examine the implementation of the strategy. Here's an example of a resource that a TBT or PLC might use to reflect upon the implementation of the strategy and the impact on student performance. This is an important step for individuals and for teams to consider when they're ready for that next step. As you can see, some of the questions you may consider are: did the implementation of reciprocal teaching close the achievement gap? How do we know? For the example that we previously shared, the common formative assessment data showed that 70% of the students are at mastery for the comprehension standard. What did we learn from this work? What worked and why? And what didn't work and why? This team's trend data has shown that summarizing has been a challenge for all students, and data from the most recent quarterly common assessment is higher than the previous year's data. They determined what worked, roll cards benefited all students, and what didn't work, more time was needed in the front end to really model each specific role. How did the strategy work for our subgroups? The team found that reciprocal teaching was beneficial for the students with disability subgroup once they provided additional support in summarizing. Students that used the template wrote more complete summaries. How should the team change, modify, or extend the strategy to be more successful with their students? They found that it might be beneficial to bring all of the specific roles together to practice their role prior to dividing teams up into all 4 roles. They felt that more modeling was needed. What successes need to be replicated? The team discussed sharing the strategy with their BLT members for consideration across grade level and content areas. They will also continue to practice using reciprocal teaching across the content areas. As we wrap up this session, please reflect on the following questions, which you will also find on the Evidence-Based Strategies Reciprocal Teaching resource document. One thing that I want to remember, one thing that I will try with my students, and one idea that I will share with a colleague. At this time, pause the webinar and discuss these prompts with your team. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen. For additional information on instructional strategies, please visit our website at www.sst8.org/school improvement, or check out our school improvement playlists on our State Support Team 8 YouTube channel.